California Pop, The Evolution of Mid-Century Subcultural Southern California by Dorian McDougall. Chapter 12, Some Assembly Required. Section title, Ramona Nation. The real estate bust of the late 1880s left the Southland flattened, again. At the dawn of the 1890s, 40 years after the gold rush, Southern California's commercial yield was limited primarily to tourism. The basic laws of economics suggest that betting the future on a single seasonal service industry greatly heightens risk exposure. But while most other commercial enterprises were struggling, if not foundering, tourism was on the rise, and most of the credit for the upsurge in this tourist activity was due to one lady, Helen Hunt Jackson. 6 years after the publication of Ramona, the myth she created had become one of the Southland's top tourist attractions. Quote, Eastern visitors commonly read Ramona as a part of their preparation for a winter's trip to Southern California. Margaret Allen. Much of the book's growing appeal derived from its stark contrast to the new, industrialized world many Easterners were finding increasingly alien, unattractive, and disorienting. Within the pages of Ramona, readers could escape from the smokestacks and skyscrapers of the big city into a tranquil world of lazy days gone by. Modernization, urbanization, and industrialization had set a high premium on the antiquated, primitive, and picturesque. For those wishing to flee the foul metropolis, the Southern Pacific could have them in the middle of that scenic pastoral in just 8 days. And so, in a general state of hyper-nostalgic delirium, tourists began arriving in the Southland, fully expecting to retrace the steps and visit the haunts of a character commonly known to have been purely fictional. Perhaps in any other part of the country these seekers might have gone home disappointed, but not in the can-do milieu of Southern California. Recognizing the economic implications of this bewildering fascination, the locals were in a panic to rediscover their forgotten Hispanic culture. By the 1890s, most of the ranchos had been subdivided into small farms, towns, and residential subdivisions. Few of the old haciendas were still standing, and nearly all of the 21 missions were in ruin. In the late 80s, faint efforts had been made to restore some of the crumbling structures, but with the Ramona craze gaining momentum, those projects were revisited with a fervent sense of urgency. Local newspapers, eager to encourage this lucrative deception, began running stories about the people and places featured in the book, further blurring the distinction between fact and fiction. Nearly every county in the Southland claimed to be the home of Ramona and began directing tourists towards any adobe relics that might bolster those claims. There was so much confusion over which sites were authentic that a team of archaeologists were sent out into the backcountry to determine the true origins of this work of fiction. There were 2 leading contenders for the title of Home of Ramona, Rancho Camulus in Ventura County and Rancho Guajome in San Diego County. Both locations had been briefly visited by Mrs. Jackson, but even though it was built nearly 20 years after the story was said to take place, Rancho Camulus got the nod. As a consolation prize, San Diego designated an abandoned adobe hacienda as Ramona's marriage place, shrewdly converting a civic eyesore into a cash cow that is still reaping dividends. The school Ramona attended was discovered in Los Angeles, and at any of those 3 locations, tourists could load up on refreshments and souvenirs and even have their pictures taken with one of the many local Indian women claiming to be the real Ramona.